This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more. Welcome to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven. And today I'm joined by somebody that I've been aware of for a very long time. Her nickname is Pam the Jam, and you'll know why in a minute. But her real name is Pam Corbin. And she is somebody who, as I say, I've been kind of aware of for a very long time because she wrote the most wonderful book, one of the River Cottage handbooks, for my friend Hugh Fernley-Whittingstall on jam. But she's also written another book, which I just cannot tell you how often I turn to it, which is called Pam the Jam, the Book of Preserves. And it's so good for this time of year. Welcome, Pam.
Thank you, Sarah, and I'm delighted to join you today. I hope I can share some tips with all the jam makers out there.
I'm so looking forward to it. And do you know why, everybody, why I did this is that one of my children is coming to stay, and we have a kind of really rather lovely mutual love of going to pick your own fruit farms. So she said, can we go and pick fruit and make jam? So we're going to go on the Saturday and make jam on the Sunday. And I just thought that is such a lovely idea. And I immediately got out Pam's book thinking, okay, raspberry jam, strawberry jam, whatever. And I just suddenly thought, I bet everybody's thinking about going to the pick your own and stashing stuff away now with those summer flavours into your store cupboard to give you delicious, delicious things to eat for the rest of the year. And so I thought, Pam, will you come on the podcast? And she incredibly sweetly said she would. So again, thank you, Pam. Tell us a little bit about your background, first of all. I'm sure lots of people know exactly who you are, but just for those who don't.
Well, how I, in fact, got into jam, it was when I'm married to a Hugh, and that's always a bit confusing because I say I've got two Hughs in my life. Hugh and I, we used to come down to the West Country to Lyme Readers, and we actually fell in love with a property which we didn't buy. But that set the tone for actually, well, let's see what we can do. Our family is young. And we searched around for a year or so, and we suddenly found a small jam making business called Thursday Cottage. At that point, it was up in the Quantocks, run by quite a crazy and chaotic owner. And we eventually bought it after a year. We were sworn to secrecy. But in doing that, we had to move the premises. It was made at the bottom of his garden. And in the end, we were living in Lyme Regis, and we realised the local farmhouse and pig building was on the market. And we ended up buying that. We went to this beautiful house and said, actually, it's a pig unit we want. It was still full of pigs, and we turned that into our jam kitchen.
Brilliant.
And we moved Thursday Cottage from Somerset to Lyme Regis and spent 15 or 16 very happy years making jam and learning a lot so much, Sarah, because although we were a small business, we still made in small pans, not that much bigger than your home pan, but we made about 3,500 jars a day. And we learned
amazing.
Hand poured, hand capped. And we had a team of about 10 people working with us. It was fun. It was good. And, as I say, I learned a huge amount. And that's why perhaps I've got that knowledge for not only what the commercial companies want, but also how to make things at home.
In smaller batches and more domestic sized batches. Yeah, absolutely. So then Thursday Cottage, in the end, you were sort of headhunted or whatever the phrase is.
Yeah, exactly. It's moved to those wonderful Essex jam lands at Tiptree. Yeah. And it's wonderful. They've looked after the business incredibly well. Thursday Cottage, I say to people, it's not made on a Friday afternoon at the end of the Tiptree line. It has its own factory and a completely different cooking method, open pan method. And again, still hand poured.
Wow, that's brilliant. So then you moved on to start working with the other Hugh, not husband Hugh, at River Cottage.
Yes, that's right. My daughter Philippa was working with Hugh and she said, "Oh, my mum can make jam." And I started to do some courses there, and which, of course, led to writing their preserves book.
So that gives you a bit of context to know who Pam is. And what is really interesting is it's actually a really modern book. So a lot of jam and jelly books I pick up, I find them not old-fashioned, but just, it could be Constance Spry could have written them, or Mrs. Beeton or whatever. And what's really nice is the modern aspect of Pam's techniques, which is decreasing the quantity of sugar. So will you just talk us through the sort of changing in fashion and how you've managed to redo the recipes to make them more contemporary?
Yeah, well, it was something that had always concerned me, that, these recipes are just handed down, and very few things change. And most people will still put a kilogram of sugar with a kilogram of fruit. And then when people are making jam, I think it all often sort of horrifies them to see the amount of jam that goes in. But of course, 100 or 100 so years ago, people needed that sugar because they hadn't got the wonderful jam jars that we have now. I often think, not only the jam jars, but those wonderful twist-on lids. And it's those twist-on lids that really give the seal. And of course, if people couldn't seal as well as we can seal our jars now, things would go off unless they were really quite sweet. A lot of those old recipes, your sugar solids would go up to 70-75% sugar by the time you've, cooked your jam. Trading standards dictate that a modern day preserve or marmalade should have 60% sugar in it. And that will give you a preserve that will keep in a cupboard and not in the fridge. However, and certainly with Thirsty Cottage, we used to produce it was a range for diabetics. We used to,
yes, I know that.
Yeah. Which used to have a 35 or 36% sugar content. So I know it can be done. But of course, in reducing your sugar, you will probably always need to add some form of pectin. And that can either be in the form of as I've made this week, I've added gooseberries to strawberries. That's a lovely way of, or you can buy powdered pectin. And also, I'm not averse to using jam sugar at times.
Yeah. And that just has pectin added, doesn't it?
That has 8 grams of pectin per kilogram and 5 grams of citric acid. So that's giving you your little magic mix, and you can make it at home. Grab a bag of granulated sugar, and in doing so, you could actually use an organic sugar if you wanted to, and 8 grams. And those little sachets that you can buy in the supermarkets, they come in a box of 3 by 8 grams. Add that and 5 grams of citric acid, and you can make your own jam sugar. And some recipes some recipes, okay, strawberry jam, we all know it's a absolute so and so to make. Put a quarter jam sugar in and you're going to increase the chance of getting a really good set.
Yes.
No, I say a good set, I like a soft set.
Yes, exactly. You don't want it to be rigid. No, I always overcook my membrillo, so that by the time I come to eat it, it's like concrete.
Yeah, and do you know what, Sarah? I think I always say to people, jam sets in the jar, not in the pan, because I've judged many, many, many preserves over the years, and I think the biggest crime is overcooking.
Yeah, totally. So it really excites me, the idea of decreasing the amount of sugar. And I always looked out for those diabetic jams because they were so delicious because they weren't too sweet. But you're absolutely right. I put them in the fridge because they would go off much more quickly otherwise. So that's the difference, isn't it? So the other thing that I love in your book is just invaluable tips. So you've already told us that the screw-on lids are really important, and perhaps we'll come on to a bit more on kit. But also I love the things like when you're making a strawberry jam, you always get quite a lot of scum because strawberries hold a lot of water. And so just tell us about your tip for that.
With various tips, are you talking about the stirring in one direction?
We'll do that first.
Yeah, it's something often when your jam is cooling, it's all too easy just to keep, swishing your spoon around the pan. But actually, if you go slowly in one direction, that will help to grease it. Don't make it, a pea green boat sort of see. The other thing is to add a little bit of oil if you've got that foam. But this is another great tip. I often love people to sort of realise you haven't got to make jam or marmalade in a day, is to stage it. I.e., you put your sugar in, and this is wonderful for strawberry jam. I made some this week. Soften your strawberries, add the sugar, bring it up to the boil for 2 or 3 minutes until that sugar has fully dissolved, and then switch off. And you can leave that jam for half an hour, or you could leave it for 24 hours. And what will happen in that time? The water will release and the strawberries will absorb the weight of the sugar syrup, and that will stop them floating. But also, in fact, when I was looking at it the other day, in that rest time, all that sort of foam just disappears as well. So, and I think that's one of my greatest tips actually for jam making, is to break it down. Don't do it in a rush.
No, fantastic. And raspberry jam, any sort of particular tips for raspberry jam?
The raspberry jam I adore, and I would probably always use a jam sugar with it.
Yeah.
So it has a 5-minute boil. My raspberry jam will have 1 kilogram of fruit, 650 grams of sugar, and a 5-minute boil. And again, you could put your sugar on your raspberries, just go away, leave it overnight, let the juices run, and just quickly bring it to the boil. Just make sure that all that sugar has dissolved actually before you bring it to the boil. So it hasn't got to be complicated. And I think one of the joys of actually doing a jam sugar or using a jam sugar in a raspberry jam, it means that people who haven't made jam before, they can actually get going and realise it will work.
Yes, exactly. And that it won't be just like sort of runny cordial. It will actually set. That's so great. And in terms of kit, if you're just starting off, I mean, what are the sort of things that you would really recommend?
Well, I mean, say a jam pan is always great. And a traditional jam pan has a narrow base with a wider top. That means the heat hits the bottom and it will evaporate quickly. They're going to cost you about £40. You haven't got to use that, but if you're using a straight-sided pan, you'll find you'll have to cook your preserves a little bit longer. I'd say a jam. So what would I say? I'd say a jam pan. I'd say a good jam spoon and a spatula. A wide-necked pouring funnel is always useful to have for those sort of chunky jams or chutneys or whatever, and probably a good book.
Yes, very good. Very good. Well, certainly your book for recipes. And then, so we talked about jam jars, and I remember on your Instagram, it's always so brilliant that we're all obsessed by putting that little sort of membrane in the top. And you're like, you don't need to do that.
Yeah, I know. I have often laughed over the years when people have paid a lot of money to do courses, and that's they go home and they think, I haven't got to do that again. Our modern day lids are wonderful. They've got that sort of food grade lining inside, which will seal. If you put that bit of paper in, you're more likely to get a mould, because actually the hot jam will hit the lid, fall back on top of the surface, and that's more likely to go to mould. So, liberate yourselves and chuck all those bits of paper away. And lids, often in sort of horticultural shows, they say you must always use a new lid. But at home, I will reuse lids as long as they are totally clean, undented, and then use them again.
And not rusty.
Yeah.
And so the other, as well as strawberries and raspberries, I was thinking when I go to the pick your own, I might pick apricots if I'm lucky. And also we've got tons and tons and tons of 2 things just coming. One, rhubarb, which we have loads of and we make cordial, but I was wondering if you had any recommendations for that. And the second is, it looks like we might get rather an amazing crop of cherries this year.
Oh, really?
So I was wondering whether, apricot jam, I know there's a fabulous recipe in here, but just talk us through those 3. So apricots, rhubarb and cherries.
What, for jams, or to do other things with them?
If you had a glut of those, what would you do with them?
Oh, right, apricot. I would certainly make some jam, and it's delicious and it's heavenly. But I would also make a compote. In fact, I made some of that this week as well, because the apricots were just beautiful. And that has got a tiny bit of sugar in, a little bit of vanilla essence. And how I make my compotes, and they keep, is by using a water bath. And a water bath is a wonderful way to sterilise your jars. And simply all it is actually it's a deep pan lined on the bottom with a trivet or a folded tea towel full of water, and pop your jam jars in there to sterilise. So they come out sort of sparkling clean, and then you put your hot preserve in. And I'm always very conscious of telling people that when you're filling, you need to make sure that fill temperature is over 85°C. Don't go off and answer the phone. Don't leave your things too long. So with compotes, fill to the brim, put one of those wonderful little sealing lids on, and then pop it back in the water bath just for 5 minutes, and that will give it its... And it's not rocket science, and it works. So certainly with apricots, I would do that. And in fact, of course, you could make apricot chutney, but some of those rather fragrant and delicious fruits, I don't always want to be adding too many other flavours to. Cherries, I would bottle perhaps with some amaretto or just on their own, and they're delicious to have in the middle of winter with rice pudding or ice cream. And rhubarb's a good pickler. You could, and lightly pickled rhubarb to go with cheese or oily fish or something. And it's a good jam. I add some to your raspberries, that will sort of take it to a different jam. I don't say more delicious than a straight raspberry, but actually a very delicious jam. And also that also will cut the cost if you're actually using raspberries, because if you pick your own raspberries, can be, horrendously expensive. So adding a little rhubarb in will sort of always help there as well.
That's a really good idea. But it's funny, the water bath thing. I remember going, when I was writing my first cookbook, the garden cookbook, I went to Italy, to the Veneto, near to a town that I'd spent a lot of time as a child called Asolo. And I knew this wonderful family that do fantastic cooking. And we spent a day preserving their tomatoes. And we used a water bath, and they did this thing of putting them into the water bath and then wrapping them in loads and loads and loads of blankets so that they got a very, very slow cool down. And I didn't quite understand it, but why were they doing that? Is that a better way of...
How long were they in the water bath for? Just a short while?
Yeah, short, yeah.
Because if you bottle tomatoes, and I always say bottle, I mean old-fashioned bottling, which I do, and again is a wonderful way to preserve, they would normally be processed for about 30 minutes. So I can imagine, I wonder if you put some lemon juice in with that or anything acidic in with your tomatoes.
Can't quite remember.
I sort of get it, and I, have huge regard for those other ways that people, old traditions. And I sense perhaps that they'd come to the boil, and it may have been actually a way of actually keeping the tomatoes whole.
Yes, exactly. Rather than sort of them turning into a mush.
But bottling tomatoes is I do a bottling course later in the year. I think that's a fantastic way to sort of preserve as well, because in September, when you've got all that orchard fruit and tomatoes, it's just lovely. Yeah.
And I've just come across a totally new fruit, and I had some jam, not made by me, bought, called chuckleberry.
Yes, it's a hybrid.
Oh, so delicious. A hybrid between a red currant and a gooseberry. And so it has the sort of that resonance of a black currant somehow, but also the sort of, I don't know, the sharpness of a gooseberry, which is one of my favourite. Well, they're two of my favourite fruits. So, I'm definitely going to really look out at the Pick Your Own to see if they've got, they might not be ripe yet, I suppose, but to see if they've got some of these hybrids.
I bought some frozen ones from British Frozen Fruits. You may well know them.
Yes.
Not that long ago. A good price. And I've made some chuckleberry jam, and it is delicious. And perhaps like you, one of my favourites is always gooseberry. It's just, it's a wonderful jam.
And any tips for gooseberry jam? Because they're about to ripen, aren't they?
Gooseberry jam, just to poach them very softly at the beginning.
Okay.
Don't not too much heat, so that and try and keep them whole. And it's one of those jams, I'd almost say, if your sugar has dissolved, almost shake the pan and not stir. So that you're like a Bar-le-Duc.
Mashing them. Yeah, great. And then, so before we finish, I'd love you to just tell us about maybe a chutney or two, and maybe a sort of a glut thing. So like courgettes. I mean, I've made your courgette and ginger jam. So it's like when we've got too many runner beans or too many courgettes, what would be your techniques for those?
Well, I think the courgette and ginger jam is great. It's 4 simple ingredients, a kilogram of, and that works. I gave some to someone the other day and they loved it. Courgette chutney is a lovely one. I've got a nice recipe in the book, and I'm not pushing the book, but I am, I guess. There's that one, runner beans. Also, there's a good beanie chutney in there, but probably one of my favourite recipes in the book is an apple chutney, a spicy apple chutney, which in fact was many years ago. We had a competition at River Cottage and it was the winning one.
Was it?
Chutney, and it's full of lots of lovely spices. And perhaps one of the things I've learned over the years about chutney making is I'm not a great fan of tripping over loads of currants and sultanas in my chutneys. I prefer them to be sort of, let's say, a single blend, really. So often I will blitz all my ginger and chili and ginger. So it's there, you've got your flavour, but you haven't got bits of it. And I find that works really well. And also there's a great carrot chutney in the book as well, which is, steps in instead of a mango chutney. So all sorts. But they are quite different to what I call that old-fashioned apple chutney that you find I often describe a bit saggy in the jar.
Yes, exactly. And that's right. They just become a bit untempting, don't they? Oh, it's so nice to chat to you, Pam. So what's new? What are you up to?
Well, I do have an honesty box for Ukraine. I do cook for. I have one very special customer that I use all his fruit for and cook for him. I have grandchildren and things. I would like to write another book, and I would probably quite like to do a preserver's almanac. And it's sort of slightly sketched out, so I just need to get on and sort of begin it, because I think that would be really useful.
So month by month, what you might do.
And then, each month, maybe 3 or 4 different methods, and then sort of move on. Yeah, so we'll see. But there's usually something happening in the kitchen or the garden.
So the University of Preserving, I guess. It's a kind of PhD of preserving techniques.
Well, I often say to people, there's no jam university. You just actually have to get on and learn it, really.
Yes, I know, but I do think it's one of the things being shown, whether it's by your granny, your mother, your sister, or Pam. It actually, I think it's sort of, once you're shown it once how to do it, I think it sticks forever. But there is something about observing, watching somebody do it, however simple it is, which is why your courses do so well. And I hope, Pam, you'll come and teach a course here next summer. I would absolutely love it.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah. So, and it's always so fulfilling when you see a cupboard full of jars, isn't it?
Isn't it? So nice.
Right.
Such lovely presents.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Pam. Lovely to chat.
And good luck with your jam this weekend. Sarah.
Yes, I'm excited. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Thanks very much for listening to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange with me, Sarah Raven, and Pam the Jam, who is the absolute queen of jam making. Next week, I'm joined by Josie Lewis, our head gardener, and we thought we would chat through what we've noticed about climate change in a garden setting. So, we're being told that beech trees, etc., won't be able to grow happily here in 50 years. But what are the plants and bulbs that we've noticed are really struggling or really thriving? So see you then with Josie.
You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.